In this video, we're going to talk about conducting a GPS field collection survey, and we're going to look at the process and workflow that you might go through in a professional setting. We'll step through some database design concepts, thinking through all of the features that you want to collect before you begin your project. We'll look at doing this work using ArcGIS Online and editable feature layers for the back-end database, and then we'll collect the data using the ArcGIS for collector app that can be used on any mobile device. So we're here in our final project section of the course, and we'll hit on a little bit on these database design documents, and we'll talk about collector, and I'm going to demonstrate how to create one of these editable feature layers and how to consume it in your collector app. So this is kind of a rough outline of our final project. And so again, this discussion is applicable to any GPS field survey you may do at a job, but I'm going to relate it to our final project as we discuss it. So the general steps are to design your database, do a little field reconnaissance to make sure that you've included everything in your database that you want to collect, and then you prepare your GIS layers in ArcGIS Online. I'll demonstrate that. You'll make a map in ArcGIS Online and add your GIS layers to it. You'll symbolize them, share them appropriately. Then you'll go out in the field and collect GPS data with the collector for ArcGIS app. Once you've done that, you can actually edit the data in ArcGIS Online, and we'll do that some to increase the accuracy since we're using our mobile phones in this case. The accuracy is a little less than desirable for some GPS projects, and in a professional setting you'd probably have a Bluetooth mapping grade or survey grade GPS receiver connected to your phone. So the project requirements are down here. You're going to design your database and document it. You're going to create your database or your GIS layers in ArcGIS Online in this case. You'll share everything and organize it appropriately. You'll GPS some features and edit it in ArcGIS Online. So we want to talk a little bit about database design, and in this case we're going to do a very simple database design. It's very important to think through everything that's going to be in your database before you go out to collect data. The design process of a database is kind of a cyclical process. You want to think through what you want to collect. Then you want to go out and do some field reconnaissance and look around and make sure that you didn't completely miss some features in the area where you're GPSing, or maybe leave out some attributes on layers that you did decide to collect data on. And truly, a database design should be done so that your database meets the needs of the organization that you're collecting the data for. There are documents on geodatabase design, and these are much more inclusive than what we're going to do. And you can see some steps. Identify the information products that you'll create and manage with your GIS. Identify key data themes. Specify scale ranges. Decompose everything down into the actual GIS layers or data sets. Make sure to define all of the tabular attributes. And then even in your database design, if you had advanced functionality, advanced behaviors like topology, spatial relationships you wanted to manage, maybe relationships between tables, maybe you had other advanced types of features like networks or raster data sets, things like that. You'd really want to think through all of the objects that go into your database, as well as all of the relationships between them, and define in detail all of the attributes. So a database design document can be very complex, and they typically are. We are going to do a very simple one, which is a great way to start. So when you design a database, a lot of it depends on the container or the format where you're going to be storing the data. The geodatabase supports all kinds of advanced functionality like topologies. We're building ours as a feature layer in ArcGIS Online, and ArcGIS Online doesn't have some of those capabilities, so we don't need to put those in our design. So the database design process, again, it can be a very time-consuming and it can be an arduous task. It's often something that people don't do as well as they should. It's the kind of pay me now or pay me later kind of thing. If you don't spend some time really thinking through your database and designing it on the front end, it's very likely that it's not going to support the kind of needs an organization has once it's designed. So you're never going to design a database perfectly. You can always update the design and modify it some, but you want to do your best to think through what the database will be used for, and what it will need to support in an organization. So for this little demonstration, we are going to look at this database design document that I've started. It's pretty simple, and you can use any format or method you want to design your database. I provide this as a template that you can use. There are software programs dedicated entirely to designing databases and modeling databases like Visio. This is kind of just a manual way to think through the layer, the fields, all the properties of the fields, default values, whether or not a field's going to have a domain or a list of values for it. And so you can use these templates to copy them and use this to create your own, or you can do your own document any way you see fit. The requirements of the project are to include 5 point layers, 2 line features, and 1 polygon layer. So you should have 5, 6, 7, 8 tabs across the bottom of your database design document, should you choose to use this one, that shows your database design. So for this example, I'm going to do a tree and a driveway, and I'm going to create the feature layers to show you how to do it. Now, once you spend time designing your database and coming up with all of the requirements of what's going to go in your database, or the database schema is that's what it's referred to, it's pretty easy to build out the database because you have all of the information right here. So I'm going to put this on one side of my screen maybe, or maybe I'll just alt tab between the two. So let's look at creating feature layers in ArcGIS Online. So here I am in ArcGIS Online, and I'm going to go to my Content tab. The first thing I'm going to do is create a folder for this map. So make it a little bit easier to organize things, and you should do this too. 2020 GIS 215. GPS demo. Okay. By putting numbers at the top, it'll keep this thing easy to find, maybe. So it doesn't look like it supports numbers to start. So we'll use this GIS 215 Spring 20 Collector Class Demo folder, which I did. There's the one that I just created. So it doesn't support numbers at the beginning of folders here in ArcGIS Online. And so I'll just use this one, which I worked on the other day. And what you want to do to create a feature layer is to go right here to create. And you can create all kinds of stuff right up here. Now, a feature layer is a GIS layer that's stored in ArcGIS Online. It's like all the other kind of layers we've talked about when you store feature classes in a geodatabase or shape files. A feature layer, if you look at the Esri help, is a grouping of similar geographic features. For example, buildings, parcels, cities, roads, earthquakes. They can be points, lines, or polygons. So they're vector GIS data layers. They can have a bunch of properties like styles and transparencies, refresh rates, labels. They've got slightly different functionality than you've seen in the geodatabase feature classes and the shape files because they're hosted online, and we'll see some of the kinds of things you can do with them. So another document that you're going to want to refer to that I have linked in Moodle is this. This is our collector for ArcGIS basic page, and this is where you can step through how to create a layer, what I'm about to show you, put it on a map, and collect data. So it's a pretty straightforward and short step through. So this is what you want to refer back to, as well as my video, to see how to do some of this stuff. So that's the whole process right there in that short little set of directions. So let's go to ArcGIS Online, and I'm going to create a feature layer. Now, Esri's built a bunch of templates for industries, so if you know you're doing a bridge inventory, you can just start off with their feature layer that already has attributes and all kinds of properties set in it. One of them in here that you may want to use, I don't know, there is a fire hydrants one. I haven't looked really closely at it, but our final project is to do a GPS field survey of your neighborhood, and fire hydrants are a likely layer you may choose to GPS. And so you could look at that fire hydrants layer. You also have in here some generic feature layers, just regular lines, points, and polygons, and you can even create one that's got all three together. I'm just going to go create an individual point one and tell it to create, and I'm going to create a point layer again. You can choose to capture GPS receiver information in the attribute table. That does some pretty neat stuff. It puts in things like the PDOP for when you collected an individual point in this layer. It puts in the time and all kinds of information specific to your GPS receiver. It's neat because you can compare your accuracy of your features to some of the other GPS receiver information at that time. I don't recommend it for new users because it puts about 10 attributes in your attribute table, and it can be a little bit hard to decipher all that stuff and find your user attributes that you want to include as well. So we'll leave it off here. I'll click next. Now let's look at our database design document. You need to come up with the type of feature, the geometry. We're going to need to give it a name. And in this case, in ArcGIS Online, we have to choose an extent. So if I go back to this document, I need to choose an extent. So where are you going to be GPSing? I'm going to be GPSing in Asheville, and actually we're all going to work on this layer together. So I'm going to include the whole state. I think we've got some folks outside of Asheville in this class. So you want to define your geographic extent. Now, from there, in ArcGIS Online, you need to give a title. So I'm going to call this tree underscore PUK demo. Now, remember, in all of our entire ArcGIS Online organization, all feature layers and items have to be uniquely named. So if there's a tree feature layer somewhere, there can't be two. So I request you'll always put your initials in things you create. Give it some tags so it's easily searchable. GIS 215. And this is for our class demo. All right. So It'll take it just a second to create that. And something I want to emphasize here again is depending on where and how you are designing your information, your we'll call it database, your GIS layers, you'll have different things that you can do. What do I mean things? Maybe not different things you can do, things you are required to do. For instance, if we were designing this database in ArcGIS Online, in ArcGIS Pro, in an actual geodatabase, you would right click and make a new feature class, like we just made a new feature layer. It does require a name. You can give it a alias that you would also see. An alias is like a label. Here you have to define point, line, polygon, or one of these other types of features. Point, line, polygon are the most common. And right off the bat, you'll see here you can choose to store M or Z values. In ArcGIS Online, that's not done right at the creation of the feature layer, so you don't have to choose that. The point is, if you were designing this for a geodatabase, you'd want this to be in your database design document. Does this feature class, is it going to store M or Z values? You go right in here and start adding fields, and I'll just say tree type, and notice you have a lot of different types of data that you can store in a field in ArcGIS Pro. You have many less in ArcGIS Online. Fields have properties here. Length, you want to define the length, and maybe an alias. The alias here, maybe you'd say type of tree. Now the alias here is what you'd see. The actual field name is type in the database. Click next, and you would need to determine your spatial reference. In ArcGIS Online, we didn't have a choice to choose spatial reference. In ArcGIS Online, feature layers are automatically stored with the Web Mercator coordinate system, because that's what's most commonly used on the internet, so that layers can work with other web mapping services like ArcGIS Online, Google Maps, Bing Maps. In order to work with those services, they use Web Mercator, so most data is Web Mercator. With a local geodatabase, we often will use something like State Plane, and you didn't even have that choice. So in a database design document, if you were designing an actual geodatabase locally and not a feature layer in ArcGIS Online, you'd want your database design document to define the spatial reference. X and Z tolerance, we usually take the defaults. Resolution, usually take the defaults. Configuration keyword has to do with SDE databases. So just as an example, you're not going to do it here in ArcGIS Pro, but depending on where you're designing and creating your database, your design document would want to cover the things that you would do in that particular database or environment. So here's my tree demo, okay, and it's got this point layer in it. I'm going to go edit the point layer here to name it tree. Okay. All right. Now, you've got a bunch of settings here. By default, attachments are enabled. That means that when you GPS a point, you can take a picture of it, and the picture will be in the attribute table. So if you ever work with a feature layer someone else made and it doesn't allow you to take pictures of points, it's because of this setting right here. You can also control what it can be exported to here. So if you ever go to ArcGIS to a GIS data portal that you can download GIS data, like the City of Asheville Open Data Portal, you don't have all these options, and that's just because they've not enabled them all. All right, so how about the fields? If you remember our database design document here, we had a bunch of fields. So let's go here to the Data tab, and you'll see that there's very little information here, but I can go to Fields, and it doesn't show all the fields here because these are system-defined fields. IDs the system uses, and then it also puts in the date a feature is created, the person that created it, or if a feature is updated or edited, it modifies the edit date and the person that did that. So what I want to do is use my design document here. I want to put in common name, make it a string, give it a default value. So let's jump back over here to this. I'm going to add a field, and I'm going to call it common name, and the display is going to have a space there. Now, depending on the environment you're creating these in, whether it be a geodatabase feature class or a shapefile or online as a feature layer, or maybe you're creating a non-GIS Microsoft Access database, all of these databases and formats have different field requirements. Most of them you cannot have a space in a field name. Most of them have a limit to how many characters you can store a field. A shapefile can only have 13 characters in a field name. So you have to be cognizant that all these have properties that vary slightly from system or format to format. How about types? You have many less types of data you can store in ArcGIS Online. You can store strings. That's the same as text. If you remember in the geodatabase, the type said text. In some places you'll see string, in some places you'll see text. They're the same thing. If it's a non-numeric kind of thing, if it's text, in ArcGIS Online you call it string. You can store dates. You can store two types of numbers. Double holds decimal places. If you need to hold decimal places, store double. If you don't need to store decimal places, store an integer. For this, I'm going to put a string in. The length was 100. The maximum length is 256. I'm going to put in 100. And the default value I said was going to be maple. You don't have to put in a default value. And in this case, maybe you wouldn't, but I wanted to anyway. If you knew you were GPSing a campus and they just had a ton of maple trees, you'd want to make that your default. So allowing null values means that this field can be left blank. Usually you want that, but sometimes you want to force someone to put a value in. So that's our first field. So let's add our second field. And if I look back at my database design document, genus, species, height, DBH. So I know a lot of these settings off the top of my head, so I'm just going to throw it right in here. And you're not going to know the genus, so don't worry about it. I just wanted to show you putting in some more fields. Now, oftentimes your field name and display name end up being the same thing. I do that a lot. Genus. Add another field. Species. String 100. Now, typically you want to make this number smaller than the default 256 because it makes your databases more efficient if your database doesn't reserve 256 characters when you're never going to use that. All right. DBH, diameter at breast height, and I'm going to put so just to show you that breast height. So that's how we measure diameter of a tree. Now that would actually be a double. They can have decimal places, or you would want to have decimal places. How about the height of a tree? Let's add another field. I often have students who are not from the United States of America, and they're not used to doing everything in feet. So a lot of times I like to put feet in a display name like that so people know what units to use. You can't use parentheses in a field name, so we'll put that in the display name, or what was referred to as the alias in a geodatabase feature class. And the height, we also want to have decimal places at that field. Now, the condition we're going to put in as well, and then observation. So let's go add the condition of the tree, condition, and I know it's going to be good, fair, or poor, so it's never going to be more than 4 characters, and most of them are going to be good. Where you want to be very careful with the length, you don't want to put less than you'll need, because it's hard to change after the fact. So err on the side of caution if you're not sure how many characters you're going to need, what length you're going to need. Right? Now, the final one I'm going to add is a comment field, and depending on the database you're using, some databases have fields you can't use. All right, the comment field I want to be long, and if I go to add field, it's going to give me an error and say that I can't use that field name because it's an SQL, structured query language keyword. So I like to put a comment field in every layer I ever create because it allows you to put comments in, and it also provides some flexibility. If there's something that you forgot to put a field in, you can put it in the comment field. Geodatabase feature classes allow you to have comment fields. A feature layer doesn't, so we're going to call it observation instead. All right, so there are our fields. Now, if I go to a field, I can create a drop-down list for it. So for common name, if I click on the field, you can see some settings here, and I can go in and I can create a list here. I could give it a description as well and change some things. These are the properties of that field. So I'm going to create a list. And I'm not going to include all of these names in mine, but I'm going to include some for now, just because in interest of time. So I'm going to say oak, dogwood, pine, and I'm just doing these off the top of my head. Tupelo, magnolia, holly. So drop-down lists are really nice for ensuring that the data put in is valid, that people just pick it out of a list. In the southeast, we've got hundreds of trees, so it's a balancing act deciding whether or not you need one with hundreds of values, but for trees it'd probably be a good idea. Now, I do not expect y'all to know the type of tree. Just pick one. Do your best. You could use an app to find out if you'd like, but tree identification is not the point of this GPS field survey. So just do your best with trees. Now, something else I'll say. I almost always put an other field as well. The other field, again, gives you a little bit of flexibility in what you're doing. In case there's a tree that you didn't include, you can put it as other and then put in the comment that this is the tree name. So I'm going to save that and not include all of these that I put in my design document, again, for interest of time. I am going to go to my condition. I'm going to create a quick list. Good. What happened there? Good. Now, oftentimes, the label and the code are the same thing. All right. Sometimes people want to store code 1, 2, 3, or something other than what you see in the drop down. You see the actual label in the drop down. So a lot of times mine say the same, but there can be difference. The code is what's stored in the database. The label is what's shown in the dropdown. Okay, so I've updated a list for that as well. All right, so let's go back to our overview of this feature class, and let's look at a little bit more stuff before we move on. So here is our feature class. Over here in the settings, you can see some important stuff about this. You could prevent it from being deleted. You could mark it as an authoritative or as a deprecated or no longer used item. And then down here, you've got a lot of good stuff. Enable editing, yes. To be able to GPS onto this layer, that has to be enabled. Keep track of created and updated features, let's do that too. Keep track of who created and last updated. So this will put who the user in the table, which is nice. If you don't have internet access on your device, you can cache the map on your phone and sync it when you get back. You can control how things can be edited, whether or not people can edit, update, add, delete, attributes and geometry. I want you to be able to do everything to it. Maybe you have people just going out and updating attributes for data that's already been GPSed. Maybe you don't want them to be able to delete or update. In this case, we're just going to leave it all on. What features can editors see? You're going to be able to see all the features. This layer and this map is going to be shared with you all, and so you're going to be able to see everything that your other students have GPSed. And you're going to be able to edit other features. You can edit and delete something someone else has GPSed. Do you want that or not? See, that can be something to consider. Okay, so we're going to allow export to other different formats as well. So it's important to just check out the settings in here. And these are some things that might be included in a database design document. It's not required, but these kind of things aren't necessarily the same kind of properties you have for a geodatabase feature class. So again, thinking about the system format, where you're storing the data influences some of your database design. So I'm going to save that feature layer. And it's been updated successfully. And now I'm going to go back to my content here. And you can see this is one I just created. This was my other one that I did the other day. I think this one does have a full list of trees, so I may use it in my map instead. If I go to data, looking at this one, nope, I did not add fields to that one yet. Oh yeah, I did. So let's look and see, common name, and I had not created a list for that yet, so we'll use the one that I just created. All right, so that's a layer. Now in ArcGIS Online, anytime you click on a feature layer, it asks if you want to open it up in a map. So it's going to show me the properties here, and then I can open it in a map. All right. We don't want to always just be opening them in new maps, but you can. It's just like adding a layer to ArcGIS Pro to look at it. What we want to do is have a map with it in it and have it saved and some things done to it. So in this case, it's fine to go in and open it in a map because we haven't done that yet. So I'm going to open it in a map viewer, and right off the bat, so it's zoomed to that extent of that layer because that layer had an extent. And the first thing I want to do is come in here and I want to change the style. Right now it's just showing everything is the same, but there are no features. So I'm going to go and I'm going to click on change the style, and then I'll click on options. We don't want a single symbol. I want to set from attribute values. No. Let's go back. Whoops, I didn't mean to click that. Apologies. I'm going to open back in the map viewer. And I am going to go to change the style. And I don't want to do it based on a single symbol. I want to do it to show, choose the attribute to show. Okay, don't click here, click here. I want to do it based on an attribute. And if I choose the attribute from the drop down, I'm going to do it by common name. And since I'm doing it by common name, I can choose the unique values. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to show my points layer differently by every tree in there. I could go in here and I could change it to make it look like a tree or a different symbol. I'm not going to spend a ton of time in here doing that right now. I'm just going to be happy that each different kind of tree has a different color. All right. And click OK. And so now as y'all GPS into your layers, you'll see the points come up as a different type of tree with different colors. All right, so I'm going to click done there. And I did not create the driveway layer that will be in here when you open this in your collector for ArcGIS app, but it will be in the map when you go to use the map. So I'm going to save this map and I'm going to call it GPS Collector GIS 215 Collector Class Demo. So we're going to all use this map to GPS some trees around our house. I'm going to give it a tag of GIS 215. You want to be descriptive in your tags. Collector demo map. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to do it kind of quickly. All right. So now, if I go back to my content page, all right, and I look in this folder, you'll see I've got that web map that I just saved. You always want to open the web map if you have already added your layer to it and symbolized it. Okay? You don't need to open the layer again. It's already in this map. So, right now, it's shared with me. If I opened my collector app, if I went and I opened my collector app, I would see all of the maps that I own in the collector app. All right. I'd also see any maps that had been shared with a group that I am in. Now, if I look at my groups here and I've got a GIS 215 group that you're all part of. If I want you to see this map and be able to GPS information onto this map, it needs to be shared with your group. So that's a very important step. So I'm going to go to my GIS 215 folder for this. Got a lot of them. Where did I put that? Oh, that's a group. Sorry. I'm going to go back to my content. Here's my class demo group. So I'm going to open this map back up. And it first shows me the properties, and I'll just open it. Now I can update the thumbnail, which I should. I can add an in-depth description, which I should. So I'll open this in a map viewer. And here it is again. Now, again, you can't see this without me sharing it with your group. I could have done this from its main page. So let's go back to content and show you where I can do that as well. So if I select this, I can share it here as well. I can change the owner because I'm the administrator of their site. I could move it to a different folder. So I'm going to click share here, and I'm going to share it with the whole organization. You could see it that way because it'd be shared with you're in the organization, or I could just share it with your group. Let's go share it with your group, and I want to make a point here, and it should show me this message. The map and the layers in it need to be shared with the same group. Okay, so it understands that this layer also needs to be shared with that group. So it's going to do it automatically for me, but I could have just selected both of them right there and put them in the group. All right. So when we get to the collector demo, you're going to see there's also a driveway feature layer that you're going to be able to work with. But here you'll see it's shared with your group. And now when you open the collector app, you should see this map and this feature layer. So the next demo will be using the collector app, and I'm going to start that in just a minute, and we'll have that demo available to show you how to collect data using the collector app as well. So expect it coming up next. Please let me know if you have any questions.